address. So this is the tax form that you can use to update your mailing address with the Internal Revenue Service for any of the following tax returns: individual income tax, gift tax return, estate tax returns, or generation skipping transfer tax returns. So this form is the tax form you would use to update your address with the IRS. Before we get into this form, which is relatively straightforward, let's talk about some filing considerations. So first, reasons to update your address with the IRS. Probably the most important reason is to make sure that you receive IRS correspondence. So there are lots of other transactions that taxpayers may encounter or participate in with the Internal Revenue Service. And sometimes the IRS has a reason to reach out to taxpayers. So they usually do not call and they do not email. Instead, they'll send correspondence or an IRS notice to your address on file. And if you've moved since your most recent tax return and you do not receive your IRS correspondence, the IRS does not care. So if you are assessed a penalty, if you receive a deficiency notice, if there's anything that happens with your tax situation, the IRS is going to send its correspondence to your address as if that's your current address. So if you've changed addresses and the IRS does not know that you've changed addresses, there's a significant chance that you might miss that correspondence. And the IRS can hold you accountable for anything that happens with the correspondence as if you had been receiving those notices all along. So probably the most important reason to keep your address on file with the IRS is so that if there is any sort of tax issue, you receive that information as soon as possible. So we're going to go through this tax change of address form fairly briefly, and then we're going to talk about some other considerations. So there are two parts to this. Basically, part one is everything you need to complete to change your home mailing address, and then part two is your signature. So it's pretty straightforward. So in line one, you'll check individual income tax returns, generally by default, because almost everyone files an income tax return. So you would check box 2 if you think you may be filing gift tax returns, estate tax returns, or generation skipping transfer tax returns. So if there is an estate tax return, then you would enter the decedent's name and social security number in the field below box 2. So as a side note, if you filed a joint tax return with your spouse and you're now establishing a separate residence from that spouse, then you would check the associated box. So basically, this box is telling the IRS, hey, last tax return, this person filed jointly and they both lived at this location. And this is saying, hey, I'm changing my address. The other person may or may not be changing his or her address, but my address is now going to be separate. So keep that in mind. That's what that box is telling the Internal Revenue Service. So in box 3A, you're going to enter your name. In this case, our hero, John Q. Doe, enters his name here as well as his social security number. And then in line 4A, if applicable, you would do the same thing with your spouse and your spouse's social security number. In lines 5A and 5B, you would enter any prior names that you or your spouse may have had And if we go to the form instructions, which happen to be on this same page, then it would give you a little bit more information, right? So make sure you notify the Social Security Administration of your new name so that your earnings get credited to your earnings record. If you changed your name because of a marriage or a divorce, this is pretty much the most common reason you would enter a name change in your prior name in line 5. And then line 6A and 6B, you would enter your old address. So in this case, John Doe and his wife are moving from 1000 Main Street in Anytown, Texas to 123 Anywhere Road in Anytown, Texas. Now, if your wife or husband or spouse had a different prior address, you would enter that separate address in line 6B. And for foreign filers, you would enter the entire name of a foreign country, the entire name of your foreign province or county, and then a postal code as applicable. In line 7, you simply write in your new address. If it's a P.O. box, then there are specific instructions that apply. Namely, you're going to enter your box number instead of your street address only if your post office does not deliver mail to your street address. In part 2, you're going to enter a daytime telephone number. This is an optional field, but it gives the IRS a point of contact to call if needed. And then you and your spouse, as applicable, would sign and date the form. If you've given someone power of attorney, you can also have that person sign here with their title. So power of attorney would be on IRS Form 2848. An executor or an administrator of, say, like an estate executor would also sign in this area. So there are a couple of considerations. Probably where to mail your completed change of address form. So there are instructions here. We cover this in depth in our article. So be careful about where you would want to make sure you send your change of address form. Now, if you check the box in line 2, which is the gift, estate, and generation skipping transfer tax, then you would send your change of address form to the IRS Center in Kansas City, Missouri. If not, then you would send it to the respective IRS office based on your location. And then probably the last thing about this is that you do not have to use IRS Form 8822 to change your address. You can change it every time you file a tax return. Your address is updated with the most current address on your tax return. So if it's, say, March and you moved, but then you're going to change your address or you're going to file your income tax return, make sure your income tax return reflects your new address. That's a simple way to do it. You can also call the IRS and give them that information. So those are a couple of options that you may decide to use if you don't want to file IRS Form 8822. And then finally, you can send in a written statement basically saying the same thing. So if you do call the IRS, make sure you have your information ready, namely your full name, your address, your old address, your new address, and then your social security number or individual taxpayer ID number if applicable. A common question that I've received is for taxpayers who operate a sole proprietorship. A lot of times people ask whether or not this IRS Form 8822 changes their business address, and it does not. You actually have to file IRS Form 8822-B, which is the change of address for a business or change of responsible party form. So you would file that separately even if you're a sole proprietor. Well, technically not. If you file if you file a business tax return, then you would file IRS Form 8822B. You can go down here to see other information if you're changing your home and business address. And then also, if you have children that file their own income tax return, then you would have to make sure that there's a separate Form 8822 filed for each child. And then finally, it does take about 4 to 6 weeks for the IRS to process your change of address form. So keep that in mind. We did put links in this YouTube video to the article, which contains all of the information we just covered, as well as the filing information such as addresses and things of that nature. You can check out our article at teachmepersonalfinance.com. Type in IRS Form 8822 and you'll see our updated article. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or if there's a topic you'd like to see in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.